everybody. Thanks for joining us. I am Amber Price, international psychic, medium, soul coach, and today I am joined by a very special guest, Dianne Gray. And Dianne is such a beautiful soul, and I am just pleased to be able to join with her today. And I'm going to share a little bit about her beautiful soul's calling and how she makes an impact in her world, as well as everybody else who gets to be able to be blessed by working with her or crossing paths with her. Because Dianne works tirelessly creating, furthering global and national advocacy, education, and mass initiatives involving all aspects of end-of-life and palliative care. Currently, Dianne is also the Chief Innovation Officer for Acclivity Health Solution and CEO of Hospice and Healthcare Communications. Dianne is also an internationally recognized speaker and an award-winning writer, journalist, film producer, and programming consultant. Her motivational keynote talks fuse research with inspiration to discuss the tough and tender topics involving the provision of quality end-of-life and grief care. Topics include tech and research as it applies to palliative care, patient-family clinician communications, spiritual and bereavement care, and issues that thwart access and raise barriers to the provision of quality care in end-of-life. Always, she focuses on patient engagement and patient-centric initiatives that build bridges between clinicians and families. Dianne, additionally, is on the board of the Elisabeth Kubler-Ross Foundation. Dianne is also on the board of International Children's Palliative Care Network and is co-founder of the American Academy of Pediatrics, SOHPM, Parent Advisory Group. Over the past 25 years, Dianne has founded 4 nonprofit organizations, each focused on improving life for seriously ill children and their families. Dianne, oh my goodness, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for the bio. In short, pretty much whatever I do work-wise focuses on either the end of life, the seriously ill, or the grieving. Patients and families. There you go. Tech, media, advocacy, legislation, policy, or communications. Most boring person ever, probably outside of that, but that's my wheelhouse work-wise.
Wow, it is, as I was reading that bio to our viewers, I was just like tingling with the sensation that you have just aligned your whole life with exactly what your purpose is here. And you're sharing that because there are so many people that are, too scared or, fearful of stepping out of that comfort zone and really, sharing what they're driven to be able to provide for us. So, I'm sure that all of the people that you have touched and continue to be able to touch and influence are so grateful that you stepped outside of that boundary.
I hope so. I think it's my calling. I mean, like you said, a lot of people don't know what their calling is. I know. So my dad died when I was 9. He was 39. He died of a heart attack. And that taught me this very important life lesson called life is short. And from that, it built upon the next life lesson and the next life lesson and the next life lesson. And they all kind of came together following the death of my son in 2005 after a 13-year illness. That, this is what I'm born to do. I'm born to reduce suffering emotionally, physically, spiritually in people. Can't eliminate it, but we can do things to reduce it. And that's why I'm here.
So with your work, you talked about life lessons, about how you learned that life lesson when your dad passed, that life is short. And with your work with Elisabeth Kubler-Ross Foundation, one of the books that I have been greatly influenced by years ago was the book by Dianne Kubler-Ross and David Kessler, Life Lessons.
Oh, so, Elisabeth Kubler-Ross?
Yes. And she and David, I guess, co-wrote the book. I'm not sure, but it had both of their names on it. And I bought that book years ago. I was drawn to it. It popped off of the shelf at the bookstore. So I thought, well, here we go. I'm going to pick this up and read it. And of course, the book really is about the, mysteries of life and from the two people who really talked about grief and dying and death. So that book really shaped how I saw things in my life from a very young age. And myself working in palliative care at that time, it resonated highly with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So definitely, how does your work influence the living as well as the people who are in the state of dying in their physical form?
Well, I think that death is an event, and I think we're living right up until then. So my work specifically focuses on that. The fact that we're here to live as fully as possible until the minute that we're not, the second that we're not. Because all of that is life. People think dying is, or death is this big, no, death is this long. It's when you take your last breath, and the rest is living. So how do we focus on maximizing the time that we're here for our benefit, which is to learn life lessons, right? And I think if we approach it that way and include the fact that even death and dying is a part of that life lesson until we either, for some people, go to the next life or life lesson, how do we do that? So that's what my work focuses on. It focuses on life. Who are you? Who are you becoming? Who would you like to be? What would you like to do? What would you like to learn? Not very often, what would you like to have? Certainly not what would you like to acquire. More in terms of who are you evolving to be? And that's what my work does. I help people to find that. And then I also do a significant amount of work on helping people to find meaning in the face of suffering, whether it's emotional, physical, existential suffering, because we all do suffer. And it's how do we reframe it and take a look at it and say, from another perspective, so that people don't go down the rabbit hole and stay stuck thinking that they're victims, along the lines of Carl Jung, I am not what happened to me. I am who I choose to become. And I think that speaks to the work of Elisabeth Kubler-Ross in that book, Life Lessons, and others, that we have choice. We may not be able to choose whether we'll live or die, but we do have choice in terms of what we do with our pain, our spiritual and emotional pain, and sometimes our physical pain too.
Absolutely. And I love that. I love that quote that you just mentioned, because when we talk about the things that you evolve to be, who I was before may not be who I am today, but I'm also not defined by my actions or the things that happen to me. So that is basically what I feel life is all about, because we all have things that happen to us. We all have things we experience, because that's the purpose of life. You have these challenging moments, you have these things that are placed in your path. And how do we grow? How do we have those life lessons? And when you mentioned about, you don't necessarily talk about material things, like things that you want or things that you have to have in a way of that. And I find gratitude is so essential in that whole grieving and living process, because it really does put into perspective what you thought you needed may not be what you actually need.
Exactly. I think when we help people to focus on gratitude, it shows them what they already have.
Yes.
And until they start practicing gratitude, in fact, there's a new app that's coming out that helps people to list those things that they're gratitude for or feel gracious of. It's amazing, because they really do look around and say, oh my gosh, I'm thankful I have this. I'm thankful I have, the relationships with my family, my friends, my faith, my dog, whatever those things are, right? The things that I have come to understand about acquisition is that if we can help people list the things that they are thankful for, in a sense of really focusing on gratitude, it helps people to realize what they already have, and therefore often they want to acquire less because they feel full.
Absolutely. And I find that, in my history and the experience with being present when somebody does take that last moment when they're actively dying,
Mm.
that is not even near their frame of reference. What we had for material things, or what we wish we had, what we did better in our job, what kind of car we had, how big our house was, nowhere near the topic of conversation. It's
Never.
all about, did I love genuinely? Was I loved genuinely? And, did I do enough for what I was here to be doing? It's very soul-centered, very deep consciousness
Mm.
topics. They're not very materialistic whatsoever.
No, and that's why people poke fun at me all the time. Like, I've never met anyone that loves being with dying people more than you. Like, because they're the coolest people on the planet. Hello,
Yes.
you know, they're like, take all that other, nonsense, and they kind of go out. And
Yeah.
then when somebody comes into their space and doesn't realize the fact that each conversation takes away 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes of this ticking time clock, right? Of this one pie. And they squander it with talking about themselves and only themselves. The dying people that I've worked with have gone, thanks, but not so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Absolutely.
stopping in, sharing your stories, but let's talk about things that matter, or even just funny jokes. They love humor, levity. They have very little time for gossip or for things that they deem individually irrelevant. And that changes with everybody, by the way. But it really is fascinating to be in the presence of a dying person, even if they're angry, and that does happen. And I don't want to diminish that and make it sound like it's all one big tea party,
Mhm.
because people are often very angry when they're dying because they do realize that they have squandered this one opportunity at this one lifetime, and that they didn't get to do the 15 things that they wish they would have, or even spent time with their grandchildren or their children, or they've let so many years pass between an argument and a healing.
Yes.
I see that a lot. Do you?
Absolutely. That is actually one of the major things that in my practice as a medium provides healing for, through that communication from the person that has passed to the living. It is a lot of forgiveness, communication, things I didn't say. I'm sorry I didn't say I love you enough. I'm sorry that I, focused on those materialistic things, or my ego was in the way of showing and sharing love. So
Mhm.
absolutely, that is the biggest, you know, lesson. The forgiveness is what didn't happen to some of us while we were here. And now we're looking for that now.
So it's so true. And in terms of forgiveness too, I see um, there's a lot of that issue in terms of suicide and suicide loss.
Yes.
A lot of forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes that forgiveness is also for the survivors of loss by suicide. The survivors have a tremendous um, desire and need for healing that has to do with forgiveness, often forgiveness for them toward themselves, right? And I want to offer that up as a real, just something for us all to focus on, that the survivors of suicide loss um, really deserve our kindness and our compassion and our empathy, because not so much because they endured just the loss, but because they also are harsh critics of themselves. I call them the three ugly stepsisters: shame, blame, and guilt,
Yeah. Yes.
right?
And that happens when, I receive a lot of clients that are drawn to me, which they had tragic passings. They had people pass by suicide. And there is a lot of that healing that has to go on for many deep, deep layers of, I wish I had have called. I wish I had have stopped by. I didn't answer their phone call. I should have known. There's so much responsibility, you know, like those three ugly stepsisters that they put on to themselves that isn't allowing that healing to happen. And because in that moment, the only message that I'm hearing from the departed coming through in that moment is, I wasn't even thinking about anybody else. I wasn't thinking about anybody that I left behind. I was thinking about myself in that moment.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. So on that topic specifically, something that I've realized is that as a culture, I think so many of us are consumed by fear, which creates inertia. And inertia is not our friend, usually. Sometimes it is, right? It keeps us from walking toward danger or doing things that we know would bring us harm. But inertia is also the great preventer of healing. I mean, it's just it confounds me why people hold back on just picking up the phone and trying to repair or heal fractured relationships, all kinds of things, right? It's fascinating.
Yes. You know, and on the opposite side to that, where we do have that, you know, that thing that's holding us back to be able to do that phone call, to have that conversation, to swing by and say, hello, I don't expect anything from our relationship today. I just want you to know I'm thinking about you. Those things are blocked. And when they are, the opposite of that is when we do experience death, it also is a call to action. I'm sure you are just, you know, intimately aware of that call to action where you have the loss of a loved one. And then all of a sudden, everything that you're compelled to do is to serve the greater good, to show up. Maybe you are opening nonprofit organizations. Maybe you're handing out ribbons. Maybe you're planting a tree. Maybe you're gathering a walk in honor of somebody that you have lost. So that call to action is also motivated by that grief. So how do you find in your experience that helps the healing process on the opposite side of that spectrum?
You know, I found that it's very much a healing mechanism, and most people don't know that it is until they get kind of far down the road. But giving of oneself is truly one of the best modalities for healing. And the reason is it helps people to find meaning following loss, and meaning changes over time. People think if they can assign meaning to a specific loss, well, that happened because of this. I want to kind of tell whoever's listening out there that meaning might change over time. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, you might find several meanings that have occurred in your life following the death or the loss of someone that you love, either a breakup or a divorce, or also to the death of someone. Advocacy helps with that, in that all of that love that you have to give comes out. All of that anger and that consternation that is inside is just energy. It's just bottled up energy. And the more we can release that energy that's trapped and stuck in here, the easier it is to get that out via giving to someone else. The more that people say to me, but Diane, I'm so lonely, I'm so lonely, I'm so lonely, I'm so lonely. I'm like, well, go get it out there. Love is not a quantifiable, measurable factor here. It's not a measurable energy, it's exponential. And I found that the more we can focus outward and give more outward, more love, more time, more energy. I love it.
I love it.
This is my puppy.
Pets are an amazing healing modality for people to share love and to have that, you know, the ability to just love and snuggle on an animal is an amazing healing.
Typically, yes. I invite you. This is my puppy. Let me see if you can see her.
Hello.
That's Abby. Abby is a golden retriever from Nashville. From my friend had puppies, and Abby goes with me to work with the Grieving.
So amazing. Oh my goodness.
But she is on occasion. I've already done 2 of these so far today. So
Oh,
Abby's a little bit over it, hearing me talk about loss and hope and
she is, isn't she? She's like, let's get living. Let's get living.
yeah, yeah. Let's talk about TREATSs.
Right. That's what her life's about. That's amazing. And she deserves it when she goes out to work with you. She deserves that.
She does. She actually, it's really quite amazing in terms of advocacy. So one of the things, you know, I do is I've started some nonprofit foundations, and they're still ongoing, most of them. And it's just whatever I was feeling at the time, and create a business plan. It has to be sound business structure, of course. But also I want to not minimize the importance of just doing the little things. I was raised in a family where the little things mean and meant a lot. Things like baking, you know, muffins and taking them next door to your new neighbor, or reaching out and just knocking on someone's door and saying, hey, I saw that there was an ambulance that came to your house the other day, and I want you to know I'm here if you need anything. You don't need to tell me your story. Just know that I'm around the corner. Here's my phone number. People, I think, have forgotten how to do the small, kind, little gestures that they used to do decades ago. I think, interestingly enough, this time of COVID has brought back many of those small gestures, like writing a letter. You know?
Yes, and you know, dropping flowers off at somebody's front door. You know, there was a gentleman recently in the news, just around here in Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. I think it was just outside of Niagara Falls, but he was just trying to quietly pick up discarded gloves from a grocery store parking lot.
Wow.
And somebody saw him just there, just doing it. And they went up to him and said, why are you doing this? And he said, why wouldn't I do this? He said, people are afraid, people are nervous, they don't know what to do with the garbage cans. The grocery store didn't know they needed to prepare more garbage cans. Everybody's in a state of panic. He said, I'm a military veteran. He says, this is my part. He says, please don't make a big deal out of it. He says, I'm just trying to do my part.
Wow.
Yeah.
That, right?
Amazing. Yeah, it really does, you know, as we are talking, because in our lifetime, right, Diane, this is our lifetime experience with COVID, with a pandemic, with experiencing, you know, grief over what our life looked like before and what will it look like coming up, and yeah, those little bits of kindness that we show to others in those moments, you know, and people that have loved ones in nursing homes or hospitals they can't be beside are out in the window showing, you know, signs, or, you know, loving them from afar. So what kind of tips, because of course this isn't new, we've had epidemics and pandemics and, you know, military events and things like that in the past. So how do you give some words of wisdom to those people that are grieving?
First of all, I know that grief changes. What seems unfathomable today, in a few months might not feel that way. And I know nobody wants to hear that, just give time to time, but it's true for most people, not all, but most. But I think too, and I mean this with my whole heart, I think we need to take a look at the fact that in many ways we can help ourselves through our grieving process.
Oh my goodness.
If people in their grief would turn to their elders or the people that have passed on and treat them as though they are their own team. A team is not just people here on earth here to help us with the practical matters. We can also turn to those people who have passed on before us, my dad, my grandmother, my son, whoever you have. We can turn to those individuals and say, look, I need you to help me. I need you to be my guide. I know that we do have spirit guides as well. And I feel as though if we would make a practice to rely upon those souls and their wisdom, because the wisdom is embedded within us often, that return to those souls and say, listen, will you please help guide me? they're with us all the time. I don't feel that we're as alone as we like to think. And on that note, as it relates to COVID, here's the thing, and I can talk about it within this forum, but I can't in a lot of others. I truly believe that no one dies alone. I truly believe with all of my heart, no one dies alone. And here's what that means. I believe that even though now, understandably, families are 100% in so much pain because they can't physically be in contact with their loved one that is dying. I get it.
Yeah.
I've seen it. I understand it. And it's so horrible for the patient who wants to be with their wife of 40 years or their child who's an adult, or, you know. But I also do believe that we have these spirit guides from the other side that do come and visit us, that do come and help the dying and usher them out. So I'm not sure that I really believe in this whole concept of people die alone. I just don't. It's not been my experience working with dying people that they're as alone as we think. And I can't prove it, but how cool would it be if there was some, you know, understanding on both that relationships are fluid, love is fluid, and that if these people can't be there, who's to say that our spirit guides, those that have passed on before us, don't step in to fill the void? I don't know. I'm curious, very curious about that. What do you think?
My experience is the same. I've been there in a moment where somebody has died and they have told me they can see their departed loved one. They can see somebody in a color or in a light that they don't understand, but that is there and it feels loving and warm and safe. I have no explanation for those things. I don't, you know, you can't see them with something to say, yes, I can see what you're seeing in that moment. But I truly believe, you know, being a medium, that I've had enough experiences to understand that in those moments that we think we're alone, in challenging times, tumultuous times, in great times like birthdays and weddings, we're not, because we get those validations back later through people like me or like others that are able to be that medium between the departed and the living, that give validation you wouldn't understand. There's no explanation. And until you've experienced it, you can't even fathom how it feels.
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I wish that everybody had the experience of joining me on some of those conversations with people who are about to die. I think they'd have a lot less fear. I just think that they don't have, you know, the benefit of that, but that the conversations are thoughtful, they're poignant, they're where there is fear. And it's not to say that all conversations are that way, but where there is fear, I think there's also significant work that we can do with the dying to help them be, you know, less afraid. But that work should optimally start years and years and years of, you know, of the timeline. I think we've got a long way to go.
Agreed.
So,
And that's why I spin the way that I offer my sessions with a client, just briefly, is I'm not focused so much on, okay, during this session, I'm going to have a connection with someone from the other side. A lot of it is based on, how do you connect within? How do you know what your soul is saying? How do you connect to know that you can pick up these symbols of a cardinal, or, you know, flashing lights, or things that they're going to try to do to get our attention? You too can understand those things. So how do we live with gratitude, with love, with paying it forward, and taking all of those things and being forgiving and showing forgiveness and admitting our faults in that moment, even if it takes you a couple hours or a couple days, at least we've gotten there, so that in that moment of death and dying, we're not fearful because we missed those opportunities. It's really just living in that moment.
That's right. And that's the thing too, to your point, what we can do, people ask me about grief and how do we get through. We can just live in that moment. And in living at the moment, eventually take a look back and you're going to see, even a month later, you're going to see how far you've come. And for most people, they're surprised, right? When they look in the rearview mirror and go, oh. Because the thing is, the dying person or the person that died only dies once.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. They only die once. And every day after that is a step away from that most horrible moment when the person died.
Mm-hmm.
So they get to go back toward, and a lot of people know that I'm friends with, another medium, John Edward. So who you know his work.
Yes, I know John Edward. He was very, very, very instrumental in me understanding as a child what the heck was going on. So thank God for people like him who were not afraid. Sorry to interrupt, Diane. I just wanted to say, thank God, because for even my understanding, it went from, I don't know what the heck is going on to, oh, I understand.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Well, here's what he taught me to add to your work, that your past is your future. So people have been so afraid that in living, they're moving away from the person that died. But for people that are of a certain faith or religion, they believe in heaven. So if you believe that your loved one is in heaven, which many people do, not all, but many, if you believe your loved one is in heaven, you're not going to go backward toward the one single day that the person died. By living, you're actually getting closer to them again. You're
Amen.
actually going to reunite them again. So you're actually growing closer to them, not leaving them behind. It's really fascinating. And on the 10th anniversary of Austin's death, I needed this big, to my forehead, because I felt anxiousness over, my son's been gone so long, I haven't seen him, I feel so fearful, right?
Yes.
And he said, your past is your future. And it took me a little bit to really embrace the concept. But once I did understand that I am indeed living and moving toward reuniting with my child, it released a lot of that anxiety, for me anyway.
That is so helpful. And it's so true. You're getting closer. Every day we're getting closer to having that moment where our experience is death to get to the other side, to the other people. And that, that living also, you're living through their experiences. So if they impacted you so strongly that you are grieving over somebody, that means you learned something from them, and your life is able to actually every day be in honor of them and emulate that lesson that they were able to provide for you. So you are essentially holding a piece of them with you as you go anyway, honoring what they did and they gave you.
That's it, exactly. I think you're doing great work, by the way. This has been a fascinating experience for me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Diane. I love this. And I obviously we needed to get together and be able to have this conversation. So I am so grateful that you had time for me today.
Oh, thank you. Are you kidding? This has been awesome.
Good. I'm glad. And you know what? One last quick thing. Self-care. How important is that? Self-care in grieving and grief and living and dying. Self-care is absolutely important. So, those things that you don't want to make time for, you absolutely should make time for, right?
It's so true. People ask me all the time, how did you get through your grief, Diane? Because the way Austin died and that he died, etc. And I said, oh, I was sure of nothing. Seriously, I was sure of nothing, except every day I put my earbuds in, or, back then, right? My iPod, and I power walked every day. And I listened to my, favorite music every day while I was walking for 30 to 40 minutes. And that's a science-based ritual. Music affects the brain in a positive way. Exercise affects the brain in a positive way. What you eat affects your brain in a positive or negative way. All right? Practice meditation and prayer. Those are very basic things that you can do, and they're all free of charge. And I'm a huge fan of helping people find ways to navigate grief other than just talk therapy. I appreciate talk therapy, but talk therapy is not for everyone. And especially in a time when people are struggling financially, they're looking for things that they can do rather than feeling stuck and profoundly and deeply sad without being able to navigate life. And I just want to say, look, don't give up, because you know what? Those days when people feel sad, or your listeners feel sad that they're just not going to be able to make it, get up and get moving and get out the door. Get out the door and power walk if you're healthy enough, you know, for 20 to 30 minutes. Of course, ask your physician if you have any concerns about your health. But try to go for a walk. Be outside in nature. There's some great research from Stanford that shows that being in nature for 20 to 30 minutes helps reboot the brain in a positive way. Those are just very basic keys, but they're so important. And the other thing too, right now in this time of coronavirus, I was just reading some research yesterday about sales of alcohol being way up, way up. And I don't want to share the number or the percentage, but it's super high because it's probably going to keep going up.
Probably, oh my goodness.
For a little bit.
Yeah.
And I share that because alcohol is a depressant. If you want to feel sad and you want to make yourself feel worse, keep it up. If you want to feel better, limit it, lessen the amount, or stop. And I know that's a big ask for some people who slide into the ritual of cooking and having a glass of wine, and then 2 and 2 becomes 3. And that's not a judgment zone. This is a science-based thing. If you want to feel happier, stop drinking alcohol. That's it. It's nothing fancy. It's just that alcohol is a depressant. And then when you combine that proactive mood with exercise, being in nature, being in, on, near, around, or under the water, eating well, and of course, trying to sleep, which isn't so easy for a lot of people right now. But whatever you can do, those little things add up. So practical tips, but they really do work.
Absolutely, because it's going back to that concept that we already have what we need. Earth is sustaining what we need, and we can find it within ourselves. And those elements, wind, water, fire, earth, all of those things are helping us when you're talking about getting outside, you know, grounding outside and using the trees and breathing in the oxygen that it provides, and the sun and water. Like, water is so refreshing to drink, but not only to like have a bath or shower, go swimming. Any of those things are absolutely just, for most of us, at our fingertips, willing to be able to get out of that habit that we get into where our comfort zone is saying, okay, let's do this because it, you know, makes me forget or takes me out of that feeling for a moment. But if you can get past that comfort zone and get outside or get active or read a book or start to draw and color, change something, change your action. Even if you do it 2-3 times, that'll become your new routine. So no longer will it be stuck in that old habit system. You'll be in your new habit system and one step closer to feeling better. And
absolutely. Absolutely. You're spot on.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Dianne. I had such an amazing chat with you today. And please keep up all of the work that you're doing in your life's purpose and in the honor of your loved ones. And thank you for sharing your gifts with all of us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're very, very welcome anytime, Dianne. Thank you so much, and be well.
Thank you.